Hey guys, my name is Ryan, and welcome to Overwatch Central. Today we're talking to Iostux, who is one of the coaches for Uprising Academy, and today we're continuing the discussion that we had about Goats Comp, any future metas that may show up, and he had a really interesting point on how it's kinda Lucio's fault that Goats is a thing, and what the game really needs for Hero 30. You can check out all of Iostux's stuff in the description below. Let's get started. We had the changes to armor, we had the changes to health priority and stuff. Granted, I don't think that's going to... It might be in for contenders, but it won't be in for Overwatch League, that one. There was a lot of theory crafting on, Hammond could do more damage to headshots because of the armor changes, Tracer's about the same and stuff. Like, now that you've seen lots of gameplay from that patch, what sort of springs to mind of going, hey, people need to know that this is a pretty cool interaction?
Not really. And one of the issues with those changes are that they don't necessarily nerf goats. They just nerf armor in general, right? And that's a problem because, maybe there's a certain goats counter that really relies on having armor, right? But by trying to nerf goats, by nerfing armor, they also inadvertently, nerfed other compositions. So it wasn't really a goats nerf, it was just a tank nerf in general, right? Which obviously is pretty good for, compositions where you run 3 DPS or maybe even 4 DPS, but it really limits your options.
Are you sort of insinuating that there was a comp out there that would have been good against goats, but now because of these changes isn't?
We don't know for sure. So the relative strength of goats hasn't been affected by the changes. That's the main issue. Because what should have happened is that a nerf would come through, they would have nerfed something that would only affect goats, because if you nerf goats, every other comp would become stronger. But with the nerf that they did, they didn't only nerf goats, they nerfed every single comp that has a lot of tanks. So the only composition that was not nerfed was compositions with 3 DPS or 4 DPS, because they don't have a lot of armor.
Or just like dive words.
Exactly. And yes, dive characters did get slightly buffed, but the thing is, the fact that, here's the thing, so they made the change to where armor is less effective now, it just doesn't block as much damage. But if you look at goats, if you look at Zarya, if you look at Diva, if you look at Winston goats, you can look at the Winston, if you look at Brigitte, they are all characters that deal less damage because of the, that deal more damage because of the armor nerf. Right, so I again think that what they were trying to do with the armor nerf was kind of buff characters like Tracer, Sombra, that kind of stuff, so that they'll be stronger against team comps that stack a lot of tanks. But that's not really true, because a lot of the tanks like Diva, they also benefit from the armor nerf. They're also going to be dealing more damage, right? So all of a sudden a character like Sombra doesn't solely benefit from this change, because most of the characters in goats also benefit from it.
So it hasn't really changed the landscape at all.
Exactly, it's just been an overall nerf in power level, buff in damage, and nerf in tankiness. Not just for goats, but for pretty much the entire game.
What would you nerf around goats then? Because Brigitte has taken so many hits that you really think that she can't take much more without just being unplayable, so...
Okay, I said this I'm pretty sure I said this over 6 months ago, and people weren't really listening. But I still believe that the only change that could be made, because the issue is, it's not really goats, the issue is tank compositions in general. Sure, maybe they're gonna nerf goats, but what's gonna happen next? We're gonna have quad tank, and that's not really that much more exciting. And the one thing that makes those comps where you just stack a bunch of tanks viable in the first place is Lucio speed boost, because Lucio speed boost does not benefit characters like Tracer or Genji like that much. It's still nice, but in order to get the most value out of it, you need a comp that stacks together, that deathball comps, because then everyone is in the speed aura, and comps that are relatively slow and immobile, because again they get a huge boost through speed boost. So I think some form of nerf to speed, to Lucio's speed aura, speed boost, would already make a very huge difference, and the game overall would become a lot more DPS heavy. So I think, depending on how strong, if it's too strong, if speed boost gets nerfed too hard, then tanks might not be viable at all, and people would just run triple DPS, quad DPS. But I think if you just nerf it a little bit, then we can kind of find that sweet spot where 2-2 is going to be in the meta, and I think most people can agree that 2-2 is kind of what we should be aiming for, because those are the most balanced and most varied compositions.
Obviously, there's compositions and heroes that you probably cannot mention to sort of end this video, but will we know when we see it, I suppose? Is there like a set composition you feel, if we saw it, was like, this is it? You know, like, obviously you can't say who would be in it, how many heroes are really emphasized in it, but do you feel that there's very much this unified impression that these group of heroes, or this hero in particular, is the answer? You just obviously can't talk about it yet, because obviously that's what you're doing with Boston Uprising.
Depending on the map, yes, definitely. Depending on some maps, there is a direct, clear anti-guides comp that goats simply cannot deal with. Where it's like, even if you play a really good goats, you would have to play goats pretty much perfectly in order to be able to deal with it. And on some maps, you know, it's extremely strong. On some maps you can play that counter comp, and only on a very, very select few maps is that comp not playable. So yeah, there is an answer out there, but that answer only works if you know, the enemy team makes mistakes that you can punish, and if you're willing to invest time into getting good at that comp.
I assume the maps that it wouldn't work on are the maps that Guts is, you know, like Control Center Lijiang, where it's very narrow and stuff.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Where just Goats is just strong against everything, right? Doesn't matter what you're running. So
exactly, and I don't think any patch can really change that. I don't think maps like Control Center are ever gonna be non-tank
healthy, right?
maps again. Yeah, and exactly, like that's fine. When looking at a map, it's fine to say that this is kind of a tank map, this is kind of a dive map, this is kind of a sniper map. That's completely fine. The only issue is when something that's traditionally been regarded as a sniper map or a dive map all of a sudden turns into a map where people just spam goats.
Right, when teams are running goats on Gibraltar, or teams are running dive in Control Center, that's where there's a problem, because a comp is unison.
Yeah, that's probably when you know that your game is in a little bit of trouble.
I guess I asked this to Jane as well. What do you want to see out of Hero 30?
So I mentioned earlier how Lucio enables tank compositions a lot. And so one of the main things that's missing right now in the game is kind of the antithesis to Lucio's speed boost. So what I would like to see is kind of like a sticky, gluey kind of character, maybe, that can just that maybe as an ability he can just kind of throw something like an Ana grenade that just puts a patch of sludge on the ground, and if the enemy team tries to walk through it, they're gonna be, you know, slowed.
That sounds horrible. I'm not gonna lie, that sounds like it's gonna be horrible to play in. It's like May, but seemingly worse.
Exactly. So that would be like a direct answer. Obviously it has counterplay, right? You can eat the slowing grenade. You can simply run around it, right? So it's not really, you know, that good in very open maps. It would mainly be kind of a thing to just buy yourself some time, right? So it wouldn't be like too annoying to play against. But if the enemy team picks goats, I think there should be, or like tank comps in general, there should be a pick that enables non-goats comps. Or maybe instead of having a character like, so Lucio enables tank comps, maybe instead of going for a character that kind of counteracts what Lucio does, maybe having a character that enables comps that aren't goats. And I don't really know how you would design such a character, like a character that is really, really helpful when you're playing dive or sniper comps, but doesn't do anything for goats at all. So yeah, kind of the anti-Lucio.
One thing that springs to mind after you said that is the rework to Torbjorn, like his sort of like Molten Core, new ultimate, putting fire on the ground. The fact that fire does more damage to armored targets, do you, like, I'm not such a, you know, like, I guess it's more of a case of, do you think that Blizzard missed a trick and could potentially iterate on heroes that do more damage to armor, or have abilities that do more damage to armor? Do you feel like an addition of something like that?
Yeah, I think that could be, yeah. I mean, Discord Orb by Zenyatta already kind of, you know, is very good against tank, because the more tanky a target is, the more value you're going to get out of the orb. But yeah, so one of the issues with Torbjorn is that Torbjorn in of himself, like, his ultimate is really, really strong against goats. His turret is just kind of useless, because goats has so much tankiness, so many shields. Your turret is just going to stand there and not really do anything, right? Or the D.Va can just fly on it and destroy it. And also, he needs a lot of setup. You can't just play goats. You can't just play Torbjorn into any comp. You usually need something like an Orisa, for example, to support him. So if they found a way to make Torbjorn maybe a little bit less dependent on his teammates, a little more independent, and maybe shift more of his power to his, to the rest of his kit, to like his main weapon rather than his turret, I think that could be good. But the turret is kind of his identity, and a turret in general is very difficult to balance because a turret is either useless or completely overpowered. There's really no middle ground. So yeah, while I think that his ultimate is definitely a very, very strong counter to goats, against goats it is just way too difficult to actually build that ultimate up, and you can't just pick a character just for his ultimate.
I guess finally then, is there any other things that you want to go over, stuff that you can actually say about the meta as a whole?
I guess what I can say is that if Overwatch League turns out to be pretty much just goats, there's always going to be a place where you can find some variation, and that's contenders. So yeah, I know that contenders doesn't always get,
nice plug,
the greatest viewership numbers, but they added like the new international LAN event, so it's going to be pretty pog. And yeah, especially from other regions. I mean, we saw it last season. China was running weird, 4 DPS compositions in Route 66, which was super, super fun to watch. But yeah, obviously, I know that, OWL is the main thing, but similar to other sports, the secondary leagues usually are more welcome to experimentation. So if you want to get some, if Overwatch League gets a little dry sometimes, maybe just watching a contenders match or two can kind of show you that there is hope, that comps that aren't goats are definitely playable.
And where can people find more from yourself and also your team?
So myself, the main way to follow me is going to be my Twitter, at Iostux. I also have a Discord, which you can link in the description. For my team, the best way really to follow us is to check out the official Overwatch Contenders website, check the schedule, see when we are going to play. I cannot tell you guys when Contenders is going to start, but I can tell you that it is going to start sooner than you might expect. So keep an eye out for that. And yeah, I hope that I can see some of you in Twitch chat.
And that's it for this time. Thank you very much for watching. As I said, you can check out all of Iostux' stuff in the description. Be sure to cheer him on in the next season of Contenders, which hasn't been revealed just yet when it is. But thanks for watching, take care, we'll see you next time.